Thank you so much, Mikael. That was fabulous. Maybe I can ask you a couple of questions. So that was beautiful. Maybe, I don't know if you can describe a little bit about the performance. What was it that you sang?
So this was a yoik. It's the traditional Sami music way of singing, and something special with the yoik is when you sing or when you yoik, you don't sing about something. You sing it. This is the yoik to the Jubilee year, 2017.
Right.
We have a Jubilee for the first Sami meeting.
Right.
That I was performing.
Oh, that was beautiful. I was wondering, from an artist's perspective, what are the biggest challenges that you find being an artist from the north or from an indigenous community? What are the things that you find are the ones that we in public sector, for example, should pay attention to the most? What would be your advice to us?
Oh, that's a hard question. Well, I think it's about what you know about us as artists. I often get the same question all the time, that we as artists always have this passion to, we do this for a reason because we love it, and often you can feel that you don't get as much, sorry, my English, you don't feel that you can always
convey,
develop.
Mm.
It's something that's quite still. You have to. You feel that when you get the same questions, you never get. You can't pass it on.
So, what would be the question that you'd ask yourself if you were in my shoes? What is it? The message that you would like to give to the participants in this conference? If there was something that you'd like to say to them that would make your life as an artist here better.
Well, I think the question is that I want to hear is what's important with your indigenous music? What is the main message?
Okay.
It's not always, you always describe where you're from, what you're doing, but maybe not always the innehåll, content,
Okay.
that artists are doing.
Okay. Well, thank you very, very much for sharing your artistry with us, ladies and gentlemen. Maria Mortensen.
Höysti.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, now we're going to have another session. It'll be more interactive in the context of a number of colleagues from across the Arctic region and elsewhere. So, if I can ask my panelists to join us. Yeah, please grab a seat. So it's great to have you all here. Thank you so much. Maybe I'll just quickly introduce folks. And so we have Anja Jochimsen, who is the head of the culture department for the Ministry of Education, Culture, Research, and Church in Greenland. We have Okalik Eegeesiak, chair of the Inuit Circumpolar Council. We have Ethan Berkowitz, who is the mayor of Anchorage. We have my good friend Helen Campbell, who is the ambassador of the European Union to Norway. And we have Mikael Höysti, who is the head of department for the Department of Culture and Resources at the Secretariat of the Nordic Council of Ministers. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for this panel. And maybe if we can go in order, I was just wondering, like one of the questions that was asked early on, I believe Höysti from the Norwegian Arts Council asked it. What does arts and culture in the Arctic mean to you? What are we talking about? Just from a point of departure. Maybe if I can start with you.
Well, it's in the old tradition. It was when the people were hunters, and it was when you couldn't get out hunting. Everybody was doing something, some sort of arts. But today we also have these young people, educated artists, and they are, as other young educated artists in the world, has various expressions. So we have to kind of see it, both sides of it, the tradition and the modern art.
Thank you.
I think it means culture and spirit. It's a form of transfer of knowledge and experience. It builds self-esteem, builds upon our languages, and it's important to indigenous peoples of the world to communicate to the outside world. But I also think we need to have a little bit more investments at the local level, at the regional level, at the territorial level, so that it could be built upon even more.
Thank
to
you.
share our experiences. Yeah.
I think that's an interesting segue for you as a mayor.
Well, there's a number of reasons why art is important. There's two I'd like to highlight. The first is art makes a community cool. That's particularly important in the Arctic. It gives a community vitality and vibrancy, and it makes it an attractive place for people to live and to stay. But the second piece, which is also really important, is art makes people think. And oftentimes in the North, we are subject to forces that come from outside. And if we can inspire people to think about the consequences of their actions, and particularly as those actions have an effect on the people of the North, then art has served a very critical function. And it serves as a check on power, and it serves as an inspiration for the public to be engaged.
Thank you. Helen.
Thank you, Artur. I don't think it's for me to define what this means in a sense. I'm not from the region, but looking at it from the European Union perspective, what we want to do is to work with the people living in the Arctic and the stakeholders there at developing economically, sustainably. And one of the things that makes Europe rich is precisely our diversity. So finding ways of bringing that out through cultural projects is one thing we would like to see happen.
Thank you.
I might say that I just agree with Helen here, because as a representative for the Nordic Cooperation and Nordic Council of Ministers, it isn't our job to define anything concerning what is considered art and culture in a certain area. But I think our role is to support the work through different kinds of means. I mean, through funding and so forth, and different programs. So that I think is really important, and of course funding through, let's say, with some criteria concerning sustainability, gender equality, involving children, youth, and so forth. So there are things that we can use as a platform, but it's not our place to define what's considered.
Can I press you a little bit on that? I mean, then why is it important for the Nordic Council of Ministers and the EU to be engaged in this? What are the broad objectives in terms of engagement on Arctic policy and Arctic arts and culture in particular that you think are relevant for your organizations that you would like to put forward?
Okay, first crack at that one.
Yeah.
In our Arctic policy, we have an Arctic strategy which was adopted in the middle of 2016 and actually discussed at a major event last week in Oulu. So I was very happy to hear the Finnish colleague speaking earlier on what Finland's doing. We have three main objectives. One is to look from a research point of view at the challenges the Arctic region faces. So we're very interested in the science and how we can respond to those challenges to the environment as well. Then to look, as I said, about sustainable economic development, and that's for me where the culture fits in. And we have programs such as Creative Europe, which Kristin Danielsson mentioned earlier today, and our Finnish colleague, and many other programs which have the potential to be used in the region. They're open to the countries which are members of the European Union. They're also open to Norway and to Iceland. But also for those countries, they can work in partnership with other countries such as Canada to develop projects looking at culture in the region, which can be about bringing more people in, making the place an even more attractive place for the tourists. I've been to the Arctic 15 times in 3 years, so I'm a convert. But I think really looking at, what do people want to come and see? They want to come to visit culture and see how that's developed. But I think also giving the many people in the region a real stake in that is important for us as well. So letting people there define it too.
Thanks.
The starting point.
Yes, and the Nordic countries are partly part of the EU, and some of them are not. So this Nordic cooperation that's been going on for quite a while, since Nordic Council of Ministers was established in 1971, I think, and it's one of the longest regional collaborations and cooperations in the world, and of course all the countries have a stake in the Arctic. They are part of the Arctic, and indigenous people live, and there is indigenous art and culture that needs to be supported. So there is, of course, this has to be reflected. And we do it in different ways through our Arctic program that has been going on since 1996, and it's going to be the sixth one, next one adopted for 2018 and so forth. And so we've been, and we also have a observer's position in the Arctic Council. So we've been a part of that, for all time, let's say. And that is, so we can't represent the Nordic countries if we don't represent all the areas and all the regions of the Nordic countries. So we have to take that, and that is, should be underlined, and it should be quite essential for our work.
Thank you very much. Okalik, maybe I could turn to you on that. I was just wondering, again, from a circumpolar perspective and from an indigenous people's point of view, how do you see the kinds of instruments that are available either through the EU or through the Council of Nordic Ministers? Is this something that, from your perspective, helps preserve and promote indigenous voices in the Arctic?
Yes, we have to work with governments as indigenous organizations and as indigenous peoples. And we like to be seen more as an area. We're more than an area. We're peoples across borders. Like Inuit are in Canada, Greenland, Chukaka, and Alaska. And we have to work with 4 different governments, which is sometimes difficult, but as one people, united, it's easier for us than a lot of other peoples as well. So we'd like to be seen, like I said, more than as areas, but as peoples, as one people, with one vision for Inuit.
And in terms of the tools that governments put in place in terms of supporting cultural expression and diversity of cultural expression within the Inuit community, do you feel that you have the access to the tools to do that? Are the communities supported in a way not only by the governments that you work with directly, but are there opportunities for partnerships across borders, for example, with other institutions such as the EU?
Yes, and I think this summit, this inaugural summit, is one thing to build upon once again. And one of the things that Inuit communities lack is the media in ways to share our culture with our communities, with our youth, and with the outside world. We want to be able to transfer our art to our youth and our across borders in our communities, but we don't have the television stations, we don't have the radio stations, and in a lot of cases we don't have the internet. So we need the medium to be able to share our experiences and transfer that knowledge to our youth as well.
Thanks. Ethan, if I could turn to you in terms of a municipality in the north and from the perspective of the United States. I don't want to make you speak for the entire
No, it's
U.S. of
okay.
A.
Since I'm now the ranking American
You're the
diplomat
ranking
here, that's
American in the room. I was just wondering in terms of the role of municipalities in this. How do you act? I mean, you were talking about 4 governments. If one talks about municipalities in the Arctic region, there are many of them. Are there networks? Are there mechanisms that you have at your disposal to reach out across borders to talk about art and culture? And what do you have at the more local level? So I don't know if you can drop from one to the other.
I'll try. But in the best of times, Arctic communities are closer to one another geographically than we are to our capitals. And that's particularly true now. And I would say from our perspective, this is not the best of times. And recently, during the Arctic Council meetings, there was a declaration of Arctic mayors, and one of the things that we emphasized in our brief time together when we were able to put together an agreement in an afternoon, because that's how municipal governments are able to function, we emphasized the importance of culture, both the indigenous cultures that make us unique in the north, but also just the culture that surrounds living in the north, and as something that's distinct from the more southern culture that permeates upwards.
And I was wondering from a Greenland perspective, and also as what kind of tools do you draw on in terms of the promotion of the culture? How do you give voice to local communities in Greenland in a way that works with other levels of government?
We have some funding, and we have, of course, the media. But I agree, it's a special problem in that area, and we. I think it's very important for us to go through the young people and their interest. They have an interest for, of course, the modern world, but the tradition as well, and we feel that very much, and we can support that. If they have an idea to an arrangement that connects the things, we're interested in supporting or getting the things they have to know to apply to the Nordic countries or EU, even EU on education. We have some, even though we're not a member of EU, we have some possibilities. But to young people, that's difficult to make the appliance, so we have to help a little and connect with our Northern Institute to help them.
I was wondering if we could pick up a little bit also on what you were saying, Okalik, about access to media. You're talking both about traditional media such as television and radio. We talked about during the course of the day new media and access to internet and broadband. I was just wondering if you could maybe speak a little bit about the challenges of that presents. Like how much of a gap is that for creators, Inuit creators in particular, in terms of where they would like to go?
It's different in each country. Some countries have more access to media than others. Like in Canada, for Inuit, we don't have our own television channel especially in Nunavut. And I know Greenland does, and I know Alaska does. So they're able to share activities as they're happening. And in Nunavut, we can't. So Inuit in Nunavut or communities in Nunavut don't have ease of access to policy development as maybe Alaska does, because Alaska has a television channel that I know of, and Greenland does. So it depends on where you are, when it is, how big an event it is. When it's a big event, it's covered more. And when it's a smaller event at the local level, then it's not.
I was wondering, from your perspective, are these challenges as well that you have in Alaska just more broadly, or do you already have the tools at your disposal as you're talking?
Alaska is far behind, and just for a matter of context, Alaska as a state is the size of Spain, France, Germany, and Great Britain put together. So we're a large territory. We have more coastline than the rest of the United States put together, and there are hundreds of communities that are without broadband support. And if you don't have broadband linkage in an information age, you will inevitably fall farther behind. It makes it harder for us to address a lot of the social issues that afflict some of these communities, as well as to create the social cohesion that exists when people can use social media the way it's used in communities that have access to broadband. So I think broadband, there is an effort currently underway to do a trans-Arctic broadband that should connect a lot of the villages. I am optimistic that'll yield good consequences for us, but you also need to make sure that the opportunities exist in a community. You can't just bring in things on electrons and hope that it's going to solve the problem. You need quality education, you need job opportunities, you need a sense of relevance. And this is one of the things that's unique about life in the Arctic. There's 4 million of us who live in the Arctic, and each one of us has the ability to make a contribution that enhances the quality of life, not only for ourselves and our families, but for our immediate communities. And that sense of being able to contribute, it gives everybody particular meaning.
And I was just wondering, this area in terms of communications, media, access to internet and broadband, from a broader diplomatic point of view, is this an area where you think there could be greater cooperation? What are the kinds of opportunities that from an EU or from a Nordic Council of Ministers perspective do you think exist in addressing some of these specific challenges from an intergovernmental point of view?
That's a really good question, and I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer that. But I quite believe, and I understand that's a huge challenge. But there is, within that lies also a possibility in that cooperation, and I think for our sake, it's more of making the possibilities, research, taking reports and so forth, finding out about the challenges, and perhaps in a Nordic or regional, concerning regional development as a whole, and digital development as a part of that, and what possibility that could be, and those reports and research that we do could be used or be used as some kind of facilitating discussions other places, and used as a so I think knowledge experience and knowledge exchange is one, and bringing people together and facilitating, I think it's our from my perspective the most important things, and trying to find out more information and facts about these, and research facts that we can rely on. So I think that's more of our approach, and so really about the cooperation in digitization and so forth. It's not really my forte, so it's hard to say.
I just add to that, we have some funding which would allow for more structural measures to take place in the north, a different subject, but to work cross-border. And that's one of the things I think certainly in the European Arctic that we can explore. There have been some very good work done on business and economic links in the last few years by the people in the region. And I think that's something, and now we can look at what consequences can we draw from that. How can we make sure, for example, that if you travel to one area, you can get across the border easily. We've just cut roaming fees, so you have that kind of thing now where you can look at how to do that. But I think there's a lot we can do through the structural side of our programs to work on these issues.
Speaking of sorry, go ahead. Okay.
Can I just to add to that again with the within the Arctic Council, the Finnish chairmanship is focusing efforts on telecommunications in the north, in the Arctic. And what Ethan said about broadband, I'd like to add that a lot of the focus and the discussion and more consideration and investments are being made into fiber optics, when fiber optics is not going to reach every Inuit community, just because of the distances and the investments required. So we also, in addition to fiber optics, we also need investments in satellite enhancements in our communities. So I just thought I'd add that as the Finnish chairmanship is focusing on telecommunications.
One of the things that you started to talk about was travel, in a sense, like moving from one area to the other, and the importance of arts and culture in the north, particularly as it links to the tourism industry. I was just wondering if you could talk about some of the challenges associated with that. For example, a lot of people travel to have that cultural experience, but part of the challenge of that is the whole question of cultural appropriation, and how do you make sure that you have authentic voices of indigenous peoples in particular, but also of northerners in general. I was wondering if you could talk about what you see as quickly as you can, pros and cons of tourism in the cultural sphere for your communities.
We could involve it a lot more in Greenland, and we shall do that. Because it's very clear that the tourists now are not just coming to Greenland to see the icebergs and the north, but they want to see the culture too. They want to hear the music, to see the art, and so. And we are not. The population is very spread out in small communities, as you say, and you have to be very ready for very many tourists. If you have a cruise ship, then they will come in 2 hours. There will be as many people in the town that are actually living there. So it's kind of a difficult thing to get everything ready to make it, even to get them on shore at the small places in a safe way and things like that. But we work on it, but it is a challenge.
Yes, thank you. I was going to add, with regards to tourism, yes, we see the opportunities in tourism, but we don't have the infrastructure in our Inuit communities to receive them properly. Like, we don't have the docks, we don't have the ways to get them on the shore safely. As well, there's appropriation, and then there's appropriate policy. With sweeping trade bans or trade restrictions that affect all our communities, that affects our culture and our arts. To use the sealskin as one example, when there are trade restrictions around sealskins, it hurts all the Inuit communities, not just Nunavut, not just Greenland. It hurts all the Inuit communities. As well, when you have a sweeping ban on ivory, that's not educational. That's not sustainable. Because walrus ivory and narwhal ivory are not threatened. They're not going extinct like the elephants are, and they are legally harvested. So be educated, get educated, help us educate the outside world that Sweeping bans and sweeping trade restrictions do not work and are not sustainable. They are not environmentally friendly.
Thanks. Alaska and tourism kind of go hand in hand.
They go hand in hand, and I'll start with this little aside, which is that years ago a Yupik friend of mine gave me the nickname Deloyhakbiolga, the walking raven. I thought this was great. It's the raven is the creator bird, and I asked her why she gave me that name, and she said it's because you're too full of it to fly. So that's the preface to my answer here, which is that, oftentimes we forget that there's an indigenous culture full of indigenous values that can show the rest of the world how to live with the land and with the sea and with the animals in a way that's more harmonious. And if we can absorb the lesson of those values, then I think that we will do a better job as stewards of our resources and also as enabling us to use those resources more wisely.
Thanks. So I'm told that we don't have too much more time, so I was just wondering if we could do a quick roundtable. If there was one takeaway for this conference in terms of potential cooperation between countries in the Arctic in the field of arts and culture, what would be the one message that you would like to share with the participants here today? We could start with you, Mikael.
Well, I think this idea and this wonderful initiative of an Arctic Arts Summit by the Norwegians and the local people here, and that's where we can do I think most benefit in this. We can be a part of it. We can facilitate. We can fund. We can try to find experts and so forth and help out these. I think for the Nordic Council of Ministers to be a facilitator, to be a part that can really make it happen and fund to some extent. I think that's one of the main parts for us, and I see that this is funds well invested, and I think when already now it's talk about future arrangements in perhaps in 2019 and so forth. So I think there is a demand, there is a need, and I'm so glad that we can be a part of that, and so happy that this really has come together, and there are so many here. Wonderful getting 250-ish people to Harstad for this event. It's really great, and a huge gathering from all of the Arctic circumpolar areas. It's a huge success already now. I'm just waiting for tomorrow, all the workshops.
The workshops tomorrow are going to be, I think, really quite exciting. I'm looking forward to those as well. Helen, I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to add.
Just to add, I think both the Arctic and culture are issues coming up on the European Union's agenda now, and we're very, very interested in them. And when Christine Danielson said this morning it took her 10 seconds to decide to come here, I think that was about the same time for us. So it's absolutely fantastic to be here, and I'd like just to congratulate everybody who's been involved in getting this event off the ground. Little teaser for tomorrow, we have a session called The EU in the Arctic, A Place for Culture, ? I think I can already take the question mark away, but I'd like to invite everybody to come and talk to us about what you want, and we can say what we do and give you some good examples of what we're doing already. So if you have some time tomorrow afternoon, we'd very much like to meet and discuss.
We'll all come down.
And we're doing that with the Cultural Council as well, because they're our main organisation for cultural issues in Norway who we work with. So please come and join us.
Excellent. Thanks. You, Ethan.
I look at some of the trends that are occurring in the world today. I think there's some very dark forces of nationalism at play, where countries in their official capacity are attempting to retreat from engagement. And one of the ways that we can bring light to the world, and particularly in the solstice time, is to engage with one another. And we can do that through art. And I think that transcends a lot of the difficulty that institutions like government have, where as human beings we can do a lot more. And I think that that's one of the great strengths that art brings to the Arctic. And I think in the Arctic we have the opportunity to serve as a role model and inspiration for the rest of the world.
Thank you.
Klienimik, they go into Hatika, when they had to Klienimikaka, it is a Rivakatok, Maluna Kaxma Yokativut. They might go out coconut that they made a kakuma, Klienimik. What do we take away? I think I want to encourage and urge you to support, work with, and partner with indigenous peoples and indigenous organizations in promoting and developing our arts and culture so that our youth have something to see with pride for healthier living, for mental wellness. I think it covers a broad spectrum of community living when you promote and support art and culture.
In terms of youth, I had to get my Arctic sealskin high tops.
Yes.
So, I think try and promote those amongst young people. They're really great. But I think that the message that you gave around I think the natural resources and the tie between culture and natural resources and economic opportunity and education, I thought were particularly important to share.
Yeah. Sometimes people talk like animals. Pretty little animals, cute little animals are a separate thing from the human beings, but we're all one ecosystem, right? So remember that. And I'd like to, I almost forgot, I take what inuhativo aku kitunito isimagijavut atsualo inuhativut isimagatigo kalimayakajavut.
Anja, the last word is yours.
These were good words, and I can fully support. And it's nice to be here, and we hope that we can have some more cooperation in the Arctic. But at the same time, I would very much urge that we use the new technology as well. So, because we have to travel a week for one meeting very often, it's very expensive, takes a lot of time, we're not very many people to do the works. So if we could do some of it on Skype, whatever, telephone, we could, I think, come a lot further in the cooperation. I would like.
So thank you very much for all of your contributions. We'll take a tiny break. And again, thank you so much. And we look forward to the more detailed discussions tomorrow during the workshops, Helen's and others. So again, thank you very much.